2/3 of Telstra's workers were signed on to AWAs after Howard lost the election last year. Len Cooper from the CEPU talks to us about the fight for enterprise bargaining rights and Telstra's anti-union human resources management.
Welcome to Telstra, proud sponsor of the Australian Olympic team.
Telstra's HR department has historically, when I say historically, the last 10, 12 years, has been very ideologically driven to put the unions out of business. That's been their whole reason for existence. And so they've been pursuing a policy of getting as many employees onto individual contracts as possible in the hope that that would take them away from unionisation. And they've managed over that 10 to 12 years to have from half the workforce to 2/3 of the workforce on individual contracts. And they now, this is HR, in terms of pursuing that anti-union strategy, probably think they're on the cusp of being able to put the unions out of business in Telstra. That'd be their view because they've got 2/3 off on individual contracts. And their hope now would be to have no EBA with the unions so that they can go and do individual deals with the workers in the industry. So that'd be their hope. After the federal elections in November, HR went flat out to try and flog AWAs, individual contracts, to thousands and thousands of employees in Telstra before the federal Labor government legislated in the new year. They knew the federal Labor government was going to legislate in February or March to stop new AWAs, but HR, bless their heart, rolled out thousands and thousands of work choices AWAs after the election, flying in the face of the decision of the Australian people who very firmly opposed AWAs and other IR questions of the Howard government. They rolled them out, they got thousands on, so there are thousands of Telstra employees who are locked into 5-year work choices AWAs now. So that gives you an idea how much dinosaurs they are. And so yes, in our view, Telstra's top management ought to take hold of that situation and say, is this in the company's interests to have an HR department pursuing such a program?
Memorandum of Understanding, what is that document?
It's a document produced, we'll call it the memorandum. It's a document produced by the single bargaining unit of unions negotiating with Telstra over their EBA. And it was designed to define a number of things relating to the relationship between the employer and the employees. In other words, make it easier for the employees to contact their union, make it easier for the union to get access to the workplace to represent members when they needed the problem, have shop stewards trained so that they could properly represent their members at work. And it related to those sort of fairly, what considered in the last 100 years in Australian industrial relations, fairly normal things. And so it was designed to do that. The need came about because the last 10 or 11 years under the Howard government, employers used the opportunity for their very right-wing anti-worker, anti-union program to wipe out those things that had applied in industrial relations for 100 years. Those very normal things. And so we believed it was an opportunity to say, let's start with a new slate. This is a new EBA, change of government, and therefore we'll apply some principles that will help employees make it easier for them to get their rights at work represented. Yes, we had a whole log of claims, as you can imagine, which related to redundancy, which related to pay and a whole number of other things. And this was just one other item to make it easier to improve workers' rights at work. They didn't want to sign side agreements. They were claiming that they were concerned about the democracy for the workforce. They said, if you have a side agreement, the employees don't get a vote on that, they only get a vote on the EBA. And so, very concerned Telstra management is with democracy in the workplace. They said, so we couldn't support that. Now, we never ever suggested a side agreement, nor did we ever say that we wouldn't be happy for them to have a vote on the memorandum. We're happy for the workforce to vote on that as well as the EBA. But they used that as one excuse. The other excuse was that it didn't comply with the building industry code and therefore they wouldn't be able to get the rollout of the broadband network which the federal government's going to contribute to.
How doesn't it comply with the building code?
Well, in the building code, which was brought in by the Howard government, any employer that was to get federal government funding had to comply with a code that the government developed. It's not the law, but it's a code that they developed. And it relates to things that they're saying to the employers: you can't agree with the unions to have shop steward training, you can't agree with the unions to allow them into intakes of new employees to sell the union, you know, you can't favour the union in any way. So anything that looked to be favouring the union was against the code, and therefore you wouldn't get any federal government money. So that's how they say, in their reading of the memorandum, it breaches that code and therefore they couldn't support it. And I have to say here that HR, Telstra HR, have made an issue of this very dishonestly, because we've said to them in the talks, we offered in the talks, we said, then when they raised this question of whether it complied with the building industry code and was legal, we said, look, that's easy. What say both of us go to the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister for Industrial Relations, and get her to check out the Memorandum of Understandings, and anything that she considers illegal, we'll take out. And then we said, would you do that? No, they said, HR is not going to do that. So, well, if we got it declared legal, would you support it? No, we wouldn't. So they're out telling the world that the reason they haven't supported the Memorandum of Understandings and walked away from the talks is because the union wanted something illegal. But I think what's becoming clear is that the business interests in this country, despite the fact that there was a change of government, are putting enormous pressure on to change as little as possible to keep the advantages that the Howard government gave them. It's becoming clear that the Labor government is moving too slowly and too weakly in regard to this. This was the single issue, more than any other, that delivered them government. And so they need to understand that there's going to be a huge backlash if they don't fix the problems they said they would fix. And that's really the issue at the moment. And here we have Telstra as a perfect example. They're trying to ignore the change of government, they're pursuing their own class interests, as they always do, and they're going to push on unless something stops them. Either a reaction from their workforce or a reaction from the federal government under pressure from the community and their workforce, or both.
Your call could not be connected. Please check the number and try again.